Hey everyone, it's Tim from Linessa Farms, specially in heirloom livestock. Thanks for joining us again today. So we've been getting tons of questions because it's fall and we're moving into breeding season. And today I wanted to answer a fantastic question from one of our viewers involving eating habits of animals that are in breeding season or going into breeding season. And I figured while we do that, let's just move forward and talk about the 4 main eating cycles of our females throughout the year. Stay tuned to find out more. So I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible, and the best way I think I can do that is to also supply you with a written document that I put together today. So I'm going to throw a lot of information at you here during our little talk today, and what I want you to do is go to www.linessafarms.com. Again, that's right here. You can see our web URL. Go there, go to the upper right hand corner, click on downloads, and I'm going to put a Word document up there that says feeding cycles. Just click on that and it will basically give you an in-depth look at everything that we talked about today. So what in the world am I talking about when I talk about feeding cycles? You know, when we think about our animals on our farm, and this is going to be geared specifically towards our female sheep and female goats today. So if I happen to use the term ewe or doe interchangeably, don't worry about it. I just mean ewes and does together. I have a bad habit of doing that, and it makes me crazy when I'm doing my editing. So we're just talking about females in general. The other thing that we're talking about today is we're talking about our adult females that are of breeding age. So these aren't our lambs or our kids. These aren't our yearlings. These are our breeding age females. So we're just going to chalk this up to females, ewes and does 2 years of age or older. So they go through 4 main eating cycles per year, and each one of these eating cycles correlates with what's going on. We have our pre-breeding cycle. We refer to this as our flushing cycle. Then we have our gestation cycle. The gestation cycle is talking about during pregnancy and what we want to do during pregnancy, specifically during the last 4 weeks of pregnancy. Then we have our lactation cycle, specifically the first 6 weeks of our lactation cycle. This is when our does and our ewes are actually making and producing their milk. And then we roll into our last cycle, which is our longest, and this is our maintenance and our rebound cycle. This is the cycle where they're just kind of idling, we're keeping them healthy, and maybe we want to reflect a little bit on the body condition of the animal and get them back where they need to be. So let's briefly talk about all of these, and don't worry, at the end we're going to talk about our males too, but luckily our males are much more simple. So starting off, let's talk about our flushing cycle. What is flushing? Well, flushing is going up to 2 weeks prior to our expected date of breeding. What we want to do is we want to feed our ewes and our does a little bit extra, and we want to increase their nutritional intake. Now, there's some conjecture amongst veterinarians and scientists as to why this works, but what we think is, what we know is that flushing the ewes, that is giving them some extra added nutrition going into ovulation, actually causes them to ovulate better. They drop more eggs, and more eggs getting dropped means more babies for you in the springtime. We think that this happens because the body, go with me here, so the ewes and the does, their body is getting in tune with what the nutritional intake of their environment is going to be. Now, Mother Nature knows that if they don't have very good nutritional intake, that they may not be able to lactate and take care of lots of babies. So it seems that the better nutritional intake they get prior to ovulation, the more babies they'll be able to support in the springtime, and therefore the better they will ovulate. So we want to flush our ewes 2 weeks prior to breeding and up to breeding. Now, fat ewes and fat does does not mean good ewes and good does. That is not what I'm telling you. As a matter of fact, fat ewes and does are probably our least desirable body type that we would want. I would rather you have an animal that is slightly underweight, slightly under conditioned, than have an animal that is over conditioned. Scientific evidence shows that fat ewes and fat does ovulate far worse, have much worse milk production, and have a much harder time carrying babies and getting pregnant at all. So again, we want just over basic body condition. Now, if you don't remember talking about our body condition, I want you to use Tim's hand trick. And my hand trick is this: when you feel their ribs, if their ribs feel like your fingers, they're too thin. If it feels like the top of your arm, they're too fat. And if it feels like the back of your hand, they're just right. This is kind of our Goldilocks effect right here. When we feel the top of our hand, I can still feel these bones in my hand, but I have quite a bit of meat in there. They're just ever so noticeable to touch, and that's how we want our ewes' ribs. When we feel those ribs, you just barely want to be able to feel them, and that's how you know they're just right. So again, going into breeding, we're gonna say maybe up their feed a little bit heavier than you've been feeding them. Another trick that you can do is you can actually pull feed back about a month prior to breeding, and then right before you start breeding them, that last 2 weeks, boom, go ahead and hit them again with a good 12 to 14% protein feed mix, a good healthy feed mix for them, and help give them a little bit of a boost. Now, when we get into our gestation period, this is our second period in our feeding cycle. Gestation period is tricky. For the first 2 trimesters, I want you to treat them just like you would normally treat them. We're just giving them those maintenance doses, those maintenance feedings of the 12 to 14%, maybe even 16% if you want to get crazy, as long as they're not over conditioned. And I just want you feeding them the regular feed that you've been feeding them all year round. We just want to keep them healthy, and we want to keep them going. Now, the trick is the last 4 weeks of gestation. This is when we want to clean those ewes and does up. When we're cleaning them up, there's 2 types of medicated feed that most producers are going to give. And for those of you that aren't down with this, that's perfectly fine. I'm not judging. So when we look at our medications that we're going to be giving, we're going to be giving 2 different types. We're going to be giving our coccidiosis medication because we want to clean them up of their coccidiosis as much as possible. We had a whole video on that you can see right here. And we also want to start feeding them with antibiotics, specifically aromycin, 4-gram aromycin, which will give them, aromycin essentially is a chlorotetracycline antibiotic that you can give them, and that will clean them up and prevent things like late stage abortion, which would be chlamydia and vibrio. Those are the 2 that we really worry about the most. As far as toxoplasmosis is concerned, it's not going to protect, antibiotics won't protect against that. That's a coccidiosis gremlin there. So that is one of the only times that we actually feed antibiotics to our ewes and does, is there at the very last 4 weeks. It is imperative that you are treating your animals with the coccidiot and the antibiotic in the last 4 weeks of gestation. This could definitely mean the difference between abortions or no abortions, healthy babies and not healthy babies. Now, when we roll into our next phase, let me backtrack. When we're in the latter stages of our gestation period, do not overfeed your animals. This is a huge no-no. You absolutely must avoid this, okay? This is the time of the year that I want you to pull up those free choice round bales, okay? I want you to start limiting their hay again to 1 flake per head per day. Do not overfeed with grain. I know you may have it in your mind. You think, well, I need to feed them better and harder because they are, making babies and everything else, and milk's coming in. Don't do it. Fight the urge. Towards the end of that 3rd trimester, towards the end of that gestation period, everything that you put in that baby's mouth or into that ewe's mouth or doe's mouth, is going to correlate to baby size, and you are going to get prolapses, you are going to get stuck babies, you're going to get mispresentations of babies, you're going to have all kinds of problems. Do not do it. You will pay for it in the end. Do not overfeed your ewes and does in the end of their pregnancy. In case I didn't mention it, do not overfeed your ewes and does at the end of their pregnancy. Now, moving into the lactation cycle, cycle number 3. Feeding those moms that coccidiosis medication, and here's the reason why. We're going to put our babies on free choice creep as soon as possible. That's very important. So we want those moms to have enough coccidiosis medication to hold those babies over until those babies can start eating medicated feed themselves and protect themselves from coccidiosis. I personally feed my animals antibiotics and coccidiosis medication for the first 6 weeks. I feed my ewes and does for the first 6 weeks. They continue to get the antibiotics and the coccidiosis medication. It makes a huge difference as far as making sure that no one's getting pneumonia. It makes a huge difference with coccidiosis. We notice huge differences. And it helps to actually up milk production a little bit as well. Now, the other thing that's going to shift gears when we get into lactation is our feed. You know, when we're getting up to lactation and into lactation, especially with our females, we're going to completely flip that phosphorus ratio that we've always talked about. Now, in all of my videos, I've always told you when it comes to our males, what do? We always want to make sure we have little to no phosphorus, because that phosphorus essentially is what causes our bucks and our rams to have urinary calculi. With that being said, our ewes and our does really need selenium, phosphorus, vitamin E. They need all those things in order to make the milk that they need to make in order to feed those babies. So phosphorus plays a huge role. We're going to talk about this in a minute, but that is why you don't ever want to feed your males any feed that has been designed for all animals or specifically females. You will mess them up in a huge hurry. This is also the time in this lactation phase, this is also the time when you're going to want to up that feed. So if your maintenance dose of feed for those animals is somewhere around, you know, 1 pound to 1.5 pounds a day, this is that time where you may want to up that dose to 2 pounds to 2.5 pounds a day, depending on if you're getting what you need out of that mom. Some moms are going to look like death warmed over by the end of lactation cycle, and I want to talk to you briefly about this. Some of our best moms, everything that they take in as far as nutrition is concerned, they put out in milk production, and by the end of lactation, at the end of that 6 weeks when we start weaning our lambs and our kids, those moms look bad. That's okay, and that is to be expected. They are doing what nature intended them to do. They're producing milk and they're giving all that nutrition to their babies. Don't get too hung up on that. What you should be more concerned about is if you have moms that look fantastic, maintain their body condition the entire time, and their milk production stinks. If the mom's not feeding their babies, then when it comes to culling time, that mom needs to hit the road and go find greener pastures, because she's not doing you any good whatsoever, and she's not doing those babies any good whatsoever either. There'll be plenty of time to correct that body condition once we do our weaning. With that being said, at the 6 weeks of age, this is where we do our weaning, and this is where we pull babies off of moms. Now, we always want to leave the babies where they're at, and I'm not going to get too much into feeding babies. We're talking about feeding our adults here. I'm also not going to get too much into feeding replacement ewes and replacement does, so just hang with me here. We're still talking about adults. When we wean those babies, we want to keep the babies where they are, and we want to pull moms away. The reason that we do that is we want to have as little amount of stress as possible. When we pull those moms away for about a week, we want to feed them no grain, and we want to feed them as crappy of hay that we can feed them, and we want to limit their water. Do not listen to anyone that tells you to remove all water. That is a huge big no-no. It's not going to do you any good. Removing water to dry out your ewes and your does, first of all, it doesn't work. It's going to possibly lead to things like mastitis, or even worse, it can lead to metabolic acidosis. They need that water to keep their stomach, keep their rumen where it needs to be. So please don't do that. Limit water intake. Give them crappy nutrition for a little while. Give them really even straw. Sometimes we'll just feed them just enough to keep their rumen going. And we also consider giving them injections of LA200 and dexamethasone, and that will help to get that bag down as well. Your ewes and does may look like death warmed over. Fight the urge to start feeding them hard to get them back in good body condition right off the bat. Give them a few weeks, ease them into it. And the reason for that is a lot of ewes and a lot of does, their bag will start to shrink down, and then all of a sudden you'll start pouring the feed to them again, and that bag will blow up, and that's when you're going to put that animal at risk for mastitis. So again, we're at this point, we're rolling into that maintenance recovery phase, and you can get them back up to where they need to be, but you need to do it slowly. So we've kind of wrapped up talking about our females. Let's take a moment to talk quickly about our males. All right, so two things really quick. I know I'm interrupting our video progress, but I wanted to bring this up. Two things. We're talking a lot about feed. In case you don't know, we have joined forces with some really good animal nutritionists, some animal feed scientists, and we have feed for all of your needs. Check us out at www.foundationfeed.com. We have feed for what you need, no matter where you're at in the United States, and we are going to get it to you extremely cheap. The most you're ever going to pay for shipping through Foundation Feed is $1, and if you order over $100 worth of feed, you're going to get it sent to you for free. So check it out online, www.foundationfeed.com. The other thing that I want to talk to you about is Linessa Farms Tack Box. Linessa Farms Tack Box is awesome. It is on Facebook. You can search for it by typing in Linessa Farms Tack Box, and it's like a forum. We have experts from all over the United States. We have members on there from Australia, from Scotland, from England, from South America, Africa, and I believe India. And they have all kinds of knowledge that they can answer regardless of what your question is regarding sheep or goats, so make sure you check that out. Hey, let's get back to the video. All right, so real quick, let's talk about our males. Now, our females are kind of complicated, as you can see, and again, go to www.linessafarms.com and check out our section up there in our download section where we talk about this, and just go ahead and get that downloaded. And read all about it, and it's free, so I mean, hey, you can't beat it. Now with the males, it's pretty simple. Males essentially only have 2 feed cycles a year, and really they technically only have 1, but we have a little mini feeding cycle in there as well. So males are essentially going to get the equivalent of baby food all year round. When we feed our babies, whether they're goat kids or whether they're sheep, lambs, they're going to get a no phosphorus mix or as little phosphorus as possible. Ours from Foundation Feed is no phosphorus, so you don't ever have to worry about that. We keep our bucks and our rams penned up alone. They obviously get a buddy. They're not alone, but they're not with the flock during the year, and they're getting fed a no phosphorus mix the entire time. Do not feed phosphorus to your males. Do not feed phosphorus to your males. You're going to get a urinary calculi, and it's going to kill your animals. I don't want to get into it, but I know what you're thinking, so I'll just tell you now. Okay, well, Tim, why do we worry about the urinary calculi in males and not worry about the urinary calculi in the females? The urethra in the male is very, very long, and it folds back and on itself kind of like a tube sock that's been turned inside out multiple times. And this is the anatomy of them. So when things grow or shrink, the urethra can grow and shrink with it. Because of that folding mechanism, when a stone goes into the urethra, it tends to get stuck, and it's very, very hard to pass. Myself and a urologist have gone as far as trying to catheterize a ram, and we were unsuccessful. We've gone as far as putting in a suprapubic catheter, catheterization, directly tapping into the bladder, did everything that we could possibly do, and they still were not able to survive. So why doesn't it bother the females? Well, the reason it doesn't bother the females is because the female urethra is very, very short and very, very straight. And it dilates very, very easily. There's no bumps or folds in it. So your females will pass calculi very, very easily. They're still getting them just as much as the males would, but they're able to pass them very, very easily. I have not ever, not one single time have I ever heard of a female getting a urinary calculi to where it caused a blockage and caused kidney issues and things like that. Not to say that it doesn't happen. I personally just have never seen it. So our males, no phosphorus. So the entire year they're getting their no phosphorus grain. They're on their maintenance dose of 1 to 2 pounds per head per day. And then right before we get to breeding time, when we're flushing our ewes, I want you to pour the coals to your males. I want you to feed, if they will eat, now obviously don't feed them as much as they possibly want, but feel free to feed them 3-4 pounds per head per day. Even if they're a little on the chubby side going into breeding, that's okay. And the reason for this is our males will not eat, they will not sleep, they will not drink, they will literally fall apart when they are in their breeding. These boys have a one-track mind, and their mind is on breeding. Breeding comes first, everything else comes second, and we hear it time and time again. And actually the catalyst for this video was one of our viewers saying, hey, my buck looks like death warmed over because he's not eating. What am I supposed to do? Well, there's really not anything you can do. And the other caveat is this is the only time throughout the year where our bucks are actually getting grain that's made for females. It's when they're in with the females. It's not going to hurt them for that 4 to 5 weeks that they're going to be in with the females. But we want to get them slightly fluffy before they go in there with the girls. Other than that, as soon as they come out, they go right back on the feeding schedule. Now, boys will fall apart when they get in there for breeding, and this is where we use things like teaser rams and teaser bucks. That is to say, we put a gentleman in there that we don't necessarily intend for them to breed with. As soon as we see that they start to breed those females, we pull them out and replace them with the actual buck or ram that we want to use. So that's the utilization of a teaser. The other thing that we do sometimes is we actually vasectomize a ram, and we'll put a vasectomized ram in there with them. That way they can't get pregnant, and then when he starts landing them, then we'll put the feeder in there. So that's males in a nutshell. Far, far simpler than our females. There are 2 other considerations when it comes to feeding that we are not going to get into today, and that is our replacement ewes and replacement does. These are our females that are someday going to be mamas but aren't quite yet. They have their own very special feeding program. And then we talk about our free choice creep, but we've already covered free choice creep and creep feeding and its importance in other videos. If you haven't seen that, check it out right here. As always, I just threw a ton of information at you, right? Hopefully you were able to follow. If not, that's okay. Check us out on Linessa Farms Tack Box. Check us out online. Follow us on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook. We've always got tons of information for you, and we'd love to answer your questions. So if you have questions, send us an email, ask us online. We or someone in our group will be more than happy to answer your questions. With that being said, I'm Tim from Linessa Farms Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again today, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.